The first time Caroline heard the whispers, she was standing in line at the grocery store, holding a bottle of wine and a package of pasta, completely unaware that the two women behind her were discussing her life as if she were a character in a scandalous novel. "That's the woman," one of them hissed, barely bothering to lower her voice. "The one who's dating that young personal trainer from the gym. Can you imagine? She must be desperate." Caroline's hands trembled slightly, but she kept her eyes forward, paid for her groceries, and walked out with her head held high. She was 45 years old, a successful architect who had designed some of the most iconic buildings in Seattle, and she refused to let strangers make her feel ashamed of the most beautiful thing that had ever happened to her. But here's what those women didn't know. Here's what nobody knew except Caroline and the man she loved. Their story didn't begin with attraction or desire. It began with tragedy, with grief so profound it threatened to swallow them both whole. And by the time you understand how they found each other in the darkest moment of their lives, you'll realize that what the world saw as scandal was actually salvation. What they judged as inappropriate was actually the purest form of healing two broken people could offer each other. This is the love story everyone tried to stop. And this is why they failed. 8 months before those whispers in the grocery store, Caroline was standing in a hospital room, holding her mother's hand as the monitors flatlined. Eleanor Mitchell had been everything to Caroline: mother, best friend, business partner, and the only person who had ever truly understood her. When Eleanor closed her eyes for the last time, Caroline felt something inside herself shut down too. It was as if someone had reached into her chest and removed a vital organ, leaving nothing but a hollow space that echoed with emptiness. The funeral was a blur of black clothing and sympathetic faces. People kept telling Caroline that Eleanor had lived a good life, that she was in a better place now, that time would heal the wound. Caroline nodded and smiled and thanked them for coming, all while screaming internally at the inadequacy of their words. How could time heal something that felt like the end of everything? How could she go on designing buildings and attending meetings and pretending that the world hadn't fundamentally shifted on its axis? Her doctor, concerned about the weight she was losing and the dark circles that seemed permanently etched beneath her eyes, suggested she try exercise. Physical activity releases endorphins, he explained with clinical detachment. It might help with the depression. Caroline wanted to laugh in his face. As if running on a treadmill could possibly fill the void her mother had left behind. But she was too tired to argue, so she joined a gym near her office and committed to going 3 times a week. That's where she met Marcus. He was 24 years old, tall and athletic with kind eyes and a gentle voice that seemed completely at odds with his muscular frame. He was assigned to her as a personal trainer, and from their very first session, Caroline could tell he was different from the other trainers who barked orders and pushed their clients to exhaustion. Marcus paid attention. He noticed when she was struggling, both physically and emotionally. He asked questions and actually listened to the answers. 3 weeks into their training program, Caroline broke down in the middle of a set of exercises. It happened without warning. One moment she was lifting weights, and the next she was sobbing uncontrollably, her body shaking with grief she had been suppressing since the funeral. She expected Marcus to be uncomfortable, to make an excuse and leave her to compose herself in privacy. Instead, he sat down beside her on the gym floor and simply waited. "My mother died 6 weeks ago," she finally managed to say between sobs. "I keep thinking it will get easier, but it doesn't. It just gets harder." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that made Caroline look at him with new eyes. "My father passed away 2 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. For the first year, I couldn't even say his name without falling apart." He paused, his own eyes glistening with remembered pain. "It does get easier, eventually. But not because the grief gets smaller. It's because you get bigger. You grow around the pain until it becomes something you carry with you instead of something that crushes you." Caroline stared at this young man who understood loss in a way that people twice his age often didn't. "How did you survive it?" she asked. I almost didn't, Marcus admitted. I dropped out of college, started drinking too much, pushed everyone away. It was my grandmother who saved me. She told me that the best way to honor my father's memory was to live a life he would be proud of. So I went back to school, got certified as a trainer, started helping other people get healthy. It gave me purpose when I thought I had none left. Something shifted between them in that moment. It wasn't romantic, not yet. It was something deeper and more fundamental: recognition. Two souls who had walked through the fire of loss and emerged forever changed, seeing in each other a reflection of their own pain and resilience. Their training sessions became something more than exercise. They became therapy sessions, confessional booths, sacred spaces where Caroline could talk about her mother without feeling like a burden. Marcus shared stories about his father, a mechanic who had worked 60-hour weeks to put his son through school, who had died 3 months before Marcus's college graduation. They laughed together, cried together, and slowly, tentatively, began to heal together. Caroline started to notice things she had no business noticing. The way Marcus's face lit up when he saw her walk into the gym. The gentle pressure of his hand on her back when he was correcting her form. The way their conversations always seemed to run longer than the scheduled hour, neither of them wanting to say goodbye. She told herself it was just gratitude, just the natural closeness that develops between people who share their deepest wounds. She told herself she was too old, too broken, too sensible to develop feelings for a man young enough to be her son. But the heart doesn't listen to reason. The heart wants what it wants. The shift happened on a rainy evening in October. Caroline had stayed late at the gym, not because she needed extra training but because she dreaded going home to her empty apartment. Marcus found her sitting on a bench near the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. "You know," he said, sitting beside her, "there's a coffee shop around the corner that makes incredible hot chocolate. The owner is a retired pastry chef from Paris. It's the kind of place my dad would have loved." Caroline looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the invitation in his eyes. It wasn't just about coffee. It was about taking their connection outside these walls, seeing if what they had was real or just a product of shared grief and circumstance. "I'd like that," she heard herself say. That first coffee turned into dinner the following week. Dinner turned into long walks through the city, turned into Sunday afternoon visits to museums and bookstores, turned into late-night phone calls that lasted until neither of them could keep their eyes open. They never discussed the age gap, never acknowledged the invisible barrier that society insisted should stand between them. They simply existed in a bubble of growing affection, two people discovering that they had more in common than anyone would ever believe. The first time Marcus kissed her, they were standing on the roof of the building Caroline had designed 5 years earlier, watching the sunset paint the Seattle skyline in shades of orange and gold. He had asked to see her work, and she had brought him to the place she was most proud of, the building she had designed in honor of her mother's love of art. They had been standing in comfortable silence, shoulders almost touching, when Marcus turned to face her. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "And I need you to really hear me." Caroline's heart was racing, but she forced herself to meet his eyes. "I'm listening. I know what people will say about us. I know what your friends will think, what my friends will think. I know this doesn't make sense on paper, a 24-year-old trainer and a 45-year-old architect. But I also know that when I'm with you, I feel more myself than I've ever felt with anyone. You see me, Caroline. Not my age, not my job, not what I look like. You see who I actually am." Caroline felt tears threatening to spill over. "Marcus, I'm 21 years older than you. In 10 years, I'll be 55 and you'll barely be 35. How can you possibly know that you'll still want this?" Marcus reached up and gently cupped her face in his hands. "How can anyone know anything about the future? All I know is right now. And right now, I am completely and utterly in love with you." The kiss that followed was soft and tentative, as if they were both afraid of breaking something fragile. But it was also inevitable, the natural conclusion of months of growing closer, of healing together, of building something neither of them had expected to find. The judgment came swiftly and relentlessly. When Caroline's colleagues discovered she was dating a 24-year-old personal trainer, the reactions ranged from shocked silence to open mockery. Her business partner, a man she had known for 15 years, took her aside and expressed his concern that she was going through some kind of midlife crisis. "It's understandable," he said with condescending sympathy. "Losing your mother, all that grief. But this boy, Caroline, he's not the answer." Caroline wanted to scream at him that Marcus wasn't a boy, that he had more emotional depth and maturity than most of the 50-year-old executives she dealt with on a daily basis. But she knew her words would fall on deaf ears. People had already made up their minds about what her relationship meant. Marcus faced his own battles. His friends, mostly other trainers and young professionals, couldn't understand what he saw in an older woman. "She's hot for her age," one of them admitted, "but come on, man. You could have anyone. Why tie yourself down to someone who's going to be collecting Social Security before you hit middle age?" The cruelty of the comment took Marcus's breath away. He cut that friend out of his life without a second thought, but the words lingered, poisoning his moments of doubt. Was he making a mistake? Was he too young to know what he really wanted? Was the connection he felt with Caroline genuine, or was he just projecting his unresolved grief onto someone who represented the maternal comfort he had lost? He shared these doubts with Caroline one night, lying beside her in the darkness, their fingers intertwined. She listened without interrupting, her heart breaking at the pain in his voice. "Maybe they're right," he whispered. "Maybe I'm not capable of knowing what I want. Maybe I'm just broken and confused and looking for someone to fix me." Caroline was quiet for a long moment. Then she sat up and turned on the lamp, needing him to see her face when she spoke. "Marcus, do you know why I became an architect?" He shook his head, confused by the apparent change of subject. "When I was 16, I told my mother I wanted to design buildings. She asked me why, and I said it was because I wanted to create something lasting, something that would exist long after I was gone. She smiled and said, 'Then you'll need to learn that the most lasting things aren't made of stone or steel. They're made of love and memory.'" Caroline took Marcus's hand and pressed it against her heart. "What we have isn't made of logic or social acceptability. It's made of something more lasting than any building I've ever designed. It's made of two people who found each other in the darkness and chose to walk toward the light together. If that's brokenness, then I don't ever want to be whole." Marcus pulled her into his arms, and for the first time since the doubts had started plaguing him, he felt peace. Not certainty, because certainty is an illusion, but peace. The quiet confidence of knowing that whatever came next, they would face it together. The turning point came from an unexpected source. Marcus's grandmother, the woman who had saved him after his father's death, requested to meet Caroline. Marcus was nervous, knowing that his grandmother's opinion carried more weight than anyone else's. But he also knew that if anyone could see past the surface of their relationship to the truth beneath, it was her. Evelyn Washington was 82 years old, sharp as a tack, and possessed the kind of no-nonsense wisdom that only comes from decades of living. She welcomed Caroline into her small apartment with a warm smile and immediately put her at ease. "So you're the woman my grandson can't stop talking about," Evelyn said, her eyes twinkling with something that might have been amusement. "Sit down, honey. Let me get a good look at you." Caroline sat, feeling like she was back in high school, meeting a boyfriend's parents for the first time. Evelyn studied her for a long moment, then nodded as if confirming something to herself. "You know, when Marcus told me about you, I expected someone different. Someone desperate, maybe, or flashy. The kind of woman who dates younger men to feel young herself." She paused, and Caroline braced herself for the rejection that seemed inevitable. "But that's not what I see when I look at you." "What do you see?" Caroline asked, genuinely curious despite her nervousness. I see a woman who's been through hell and come out the other side. I see someone who carries herself with dignity, who's accomplished things most people only dream about, who's faced loss and somehow kept going. Evelyn leaned forward, her voice dropping to something softer. I also see someone who looks at my grandson like he hung the moon. And honey, that's worth more than anything else. Caroline felt tears prickling at her eyes. You don't think I'm too old for him? Evelyn laughed, a rich sound that seemed to fill the small apartment. Too old. Child, I was married to a man 11 years younger than me for 47 years. My own mother told me I was making a fool of myself. My friends said it would never last. And you know what? We were happy until the day he died. Happier than most couples who did everything by the book. She reached out and took Caroline's hand. Age is just a number on paper. What matters is what's in here. She pressed her other hand against her heart. And I can see that you and Marcus have something real. Something worth fighting for. When Marcus drove Caroline home that night, she was silent for a long time, processing everything his grandmother had said. Finally, she turned to him with a new resolve in her eyes. I'm done hiding, she said. I'm done caring what people think or say. Your grandmother is right. What we have is worth fighting for. And I'm ready to fight. Marcus pulled over to the side of the road, unable to wait another second to kiss her. I love you, he said against her lips. I love you so much it terrifies me. I love you too, she whispered back. And I'm done being terrified. The next 2 years tested them in ways they couldn't have anticipated. Caroline's business partner eventually came around, won over by the undeniable happiness that radiated from her whenever Marcus was mentioned. Her clients, initially skeptical, saw no change in the quality of her work and gradually stopped caring about her personal life. Some even expressed admiration for her courage in following her heart. Marcus's journey was harder. He lost several friends who couldn't accept his choice, and his relationship with his mother remained strained. She had taken years to warm up to the idea, but slowly, seeing how happy he was, she began to soften. The first time she invited Caroline to a family dinner, Marcus actually cried with relief. They moved in together after 18 months, combining their lives in a small house near the waterfront. Caroline filled it with art and books, Marcus added his collection of vintage vinyl records and his father's old tools, and together they created a home that reflected both of them. They hosted dinners for their combined friends and families, slowly building a community of people who loved them not despite their differences but because of the unique beauty of their connection. On the second anniversary of their first coffee date, Marcus surprised Caroline with a trip to Paris. He had been saving for months, working extra training sessions, cutting back on expenses, all to give her this gift. They spent a week wandering through the city of lights, hand in hand, completely oblivious to the curious glances of strangers who tried to categorize their relationship and failed. It was in Paris, standing before the Sacré-Cœur as the sun set over the city, that Marcus got down on one knee. Caroline Mitchell, he said, his voice steady despite the tears streaming down his face, you came into my life when I thought I had nothing left to give. You showed me that grief doesn't have to be the end, that love can bloom in the most unexpected places. I don't have a fancy speech prepared. I just have the truth. I want to spend every day of the rest of my life waking up next to you. I want to grow old with you, even if that means I'm still relatively young while you're complaining about your joints. I want everything, Caroline. I want forever. Caroline was laughing and crying simultaneously, a mess of emotions that rendered her temporarily speechless. When she finally found her voice, she said the only word that mattered. Yes. Their wedding was held in the building Caroline had designed, the one where they had shared their first kiss. Marcus's grandmother was the guest of honor, and she cried through the entire ceremony while simultaneously beaming with pride. Caroline's colleagues attended, some genuinely happy for her, others still privately skeptical but keeping their opinions to themselves. Marcus's mother sat in the front row, finally at peace with her son's choice, finally able to see what he had seen all along. The whispers never completely stopped. There were always people ready to judge, to speculate, to dismiss their love as a phase or a mistake. But Caroline and Marcus had long since stopped caring. They had built something real, something lasting, something that transcended the arbitrary rules society tried to impose on love. 5 years after their wedding, Caroline and Marcus welcomed a daughter into their lives through adoption. They named her Eleanor, after the mother whose death had set this entire journey in motion. When Caroline held her daughter for the first time, she felt her mother's presence so strongly that it took her breath away. As if Eleanor Mitchell herself was giving her blessing, saying goodbye to the grief and hello to the joy that had finally found its way home. Marcus, now 32, turned out to be an exceptional father. All the nurturing instincts that had made him such a compassionate trainer translated beautifully to parenthood. He changed diapers, sang lullabies off-key, and walked the floor with their crying baby at 3 in the morning without a single complaint. Caroline watched him grow into this role and fell in love with him all over again, deeper than before. On their 10th anniversary, they returned to Paris with their daughter. Standing in the same spot where Marcus had proposed, they renewed their vows in a private ceremony with only little Eleanor as their witness. The girl, now 5 years old, thought it was the most romantic thing she had ever seen and demanded to know when she could have a wedding of her own. "When you find someone who loves you like your daddy loves me," Caroline told her. "Someone who sees who you really are and loves you for exactly that. It might take time, baby girl. It might come from an unexpected place. But when you find it, you'll know. And you should never, ever let anyone tell you it's wrong." Years later, when Eleanor was old enough to understand their story fully, she would tell her friends that her parents were the greatest love story she had ever known. Not because it was easy, but because it was hard. Because they chose each other every single day, in defiance of everyone who said they shouldn't. Because they proved that love isn't about matching numbers on a birth certificate. It's about matching souls. Caroline passed away at 83, surrounded by her husband and daughter and grandchildren. Marcus was 62 by then, still fit and healthy thanks to a lifetime of taking care of his body. They had been married for 35 years, and he had loved her more on the last day than he had on the first. At her funeral, their daughter Eleanor stood before the gathered mourners and told the story of how her parents met. She spoke of grief transformed into healing, of judgment overcome by love, of two people who proved that the heart doesn't follow rules. By the time she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. The last line of her eulogy would be carved into Caroline's headstone, a final testament to the love that everyone judged but no one could stop. She taught us that real love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone perfect for you. If this story moved something inside you, if it made you think about the loves in your own life that don't fit neatly into boxes, take a moment to be part of this conversation. Drop a comment sharing what this story meant to you. Hit that like button if you believe that love is bigger than society's expectations. And if you're not already part of this community, consider joining so you never miss another story that speaks to the parts of you that matter most. Because in a world that's quick to judge, stories like this remind us what's truly important.